The major anarchist cultures, where there were mass movements, were in France, Spain, Italy, Russia. And it was carried to the Americas by militants in the United States and to Latin America, to countries like Mexico, Cuba, Brazil, and Argentina. It was the apparent success of the Russian Revolution in 1917 that saw anarchism begin to go into terminal decline, except in the Hispanic world. But in Spain in 1936, there was a major anarchist revolution leading to the Civil War. But with the defeat of the Spanish Republic early in the 1930s, proletarian anarchism globally began to disappear very rapidly. In isolated pockets, as in Cuba, retaining significant strength. The anarchist revival dates in the 1960s, which with its student radicalism and permissiveness created both general libertarianism and a new audience receptive to anarchist ideas. But it needs to be stressed that the anarchists in the 1960s were not a historic anarchist movement resurrected. They were something quite different. A series of new manifestations of the idea. For the new anarchists were students, peace activists, or some such, increasingly environmentalists. Their movement was not composed, is not composed of artisans, or labourers, or peasants. So the important thing to remember is the idea of anarchism, long predating the third quarter of the 19th century. And it is this idea which has survived the demise of the historic movement. Let me move rapidly on to the association between artists and anarchism. In Britain, the art critic, poet, literary critic, advocate of modern art, Herbert Reed, announced that he was an anarchist in 1937. He wrote later, "In calling my principles anarchism, I have forfeited any claim to be taken seriously as a politician, and have cut myself off from the main current of socialist activity in England. But," he continued, "but I have often found sympathy and agreement in unexpected places, and there are many intellectuals who are fundamentally anarchist in their political outlook, but who do not dare to invite ridicule by confessing it. There's truth in this, yet the argument should not be pressed too far, for it needs to be refined. But there can be no doubt that one type of intellectual has been consistently drawn to anarchism, placing a premium on absolute freedom and on non-interference in their personal and social lives. Those are the key things, I believe, and belonging, like Herbert Reed himself, to the artistic and the literary avant-gardes. Significant clusters of anarchist painters and writers existed in pre-1914 Italy, the Revisionists. New York, before and during World War I, in particular the origins of colour. And most impressive of all, France, of the 1880s and 1890s, where the Neo-Impressionists and the Symbolist writers all consisted of militant anarchist sympathisers. So amongst the Neo-Impressionist painters, Camille Pissarro and his son Lucien or Signac, most probably the enigmatic Georges Seurat, who was a close friend of all these other militant anarchists. Among the Symbolist writers, one of the greatest poets of all, Stéphane Mallarmé. So there's been that historic affinity between anarchism and artists. I need to say something about what I call the arts and crafts perspective, because that is a particularly British tradition. It's one which I advocate myself. William Morris is crucial here, following John Ruskin, believing that, quote, "Art is the expression of man's pleasure in labour, that it is possible for a man to rejoice in his work, and that unless man's work once again becomes a pleasure to him, all but the worthless, the rich and idle, must toil in pain and therefore live in pain. I'm sure you excuse his gendered language, appreciating that he and also my next writer were living in United Times. Eric Gill is an important figure in England, a distinguished letter cutter, typographer, and illustrator, and also a remarkable sculptor. He reiterated continually in the last years of his life that, quote, "The artist is not a special kind of man, but every man is a special kind of artist." Predictably appropriated from his friend, the very interesting Anglo-Tamil art historian and aesthetician, Ananda Kumaraswamy. Herbert Reed and Eric Gill were friends and neighbours at the end of the 1930s, before Gill's death in 1940. Reed was very, very impressed by Gill, believing that he belonged to that rare company of integral socialists whose lives are a consequence of their socialism. Reed thought Gill managed to live like an anarchist. And in the 1940s, Reed himself wrote a very interesting essay advocating what he called a double-decker or duplex civilization, in which he thought there would be a division between a public machine art, which he'd been advocating for years, abstract and geometrical, but it would be balanced by a private, naturalistic or humanistic art. Obviously, contemporary society then, and I think still, exemplifies to a significant extent a double-decker civilization. Reed proposed that the creative arts of every kind should be made the basis of the educational system. His conclusion was that the result would be a private art standing over against the public art of the factories. He thought that we have already a tiny minority of people calling themselves artists. I'm recommending, he said, that everyone should be an artist. Now, this is the arts and crafts perspective, that really either already everybody is an artist, or if they aren't, they should be.